So this project is for the creation of a data management system and the automation architecture for the Center for Breakthrough Medicines. It was designed to provide a robust data integrity throughout the enterprise and to allow for the development of data contextualization from the shop floor all the way up to the top floor of the enterprise. It was also developed and built with our automation integrator friends, Skellig Automation. So a little background about it. The Center for Breakthrough Medicines is a contract development and manufacturing organization for the cell and gene therapy industry, located just outside of Philadelphia. It was established in 29 with the goal of being the first and only CGT CDMO to provide end-to-end capability from development, as you see listed in process development, analytical development labs, through the manufacturing of viral vector plasmids and cell therapy. The requirements for this project were really to have seamless, agile, scalable, adaptable monitoring of the manufacturing suites and to be able to contextualize all of the data from the shop floor, from the equipment process and room data. And it was critical to develop the architecture that way because of the fact that we are working with a CDMO. The other part of this was to make sure that it was cost effective and scalable. It needed to be flexible, it needed to be extensible for the ongoing development of automated capabilities. One of the things about CBM is that it was a startup, as I said, founded in 2019, really got started in 2020, and the capabilities developed over time. So we couldn't come out of the gate with everything built in. It needed to be scalable so that we could add capabilities as we went forward. The other key aspect of a CDMO is that we don't have the luxury of having a clearly defined end process state. We take the process from our clients and adapt it into our functionality and our operations floor. So we needed a system to be able to manage all of that. And finally, but certainly not least, the architecture needed to be resilient and redundant. We needed to minimize the risk to any data integrity issues. So we focused on having systems that were redundant where necessary, as resilient as possible. We pushed contextualization to the edge. So that allowed us to have a more modular infrastructure that we could develop once and reuse on different floors, different buildings, different locations and new future sites. And also pushing the contextualization and all of the capabilities to the edge and as close as possible to the process equipment, also minimize the risk of any data drop between the site location on the floor or building that we were in and the data center, which was centralized.
In addition to those business requirements, we needed to think about what our data needs were and what we needed our data to do. As a CDMO, data is the lifeblood of our business, and we needed a well-developed data model to make sure we were operating effectively and efficiently. The way we approach this is by asking ourselves these 5 questions. What data do we have? What does it mean? How is it related? What can it tell us? And how do we take our data and put it back to work for us? As a startup, we didn't really have any end user asks yet. So one of the things we did is we sat down and thought through this process, and we developed a set of user requirements based on capability. So first and foremost, being as this is a data management system, we needed to focus on data collection, data contextualization, and effective dissemination to end users and decision makers. One of the other things that's key there is being able to identify what data belongs to what client. As a CDMO having potentially hundreds of clients, we can't share data between clients. So we were able to use a UNS structure and assigning metadata via MQTT to be able to identify what data belongs to what client and prevent sharing of data between those clients through logical controls, which was a very effective and very efficient. The other thing that's huge in the pharma industry is that we're a regulated industry. So our validation approach and compliance is key to how we operate our business effectively and efficiently. We needed to make sure that we accounted for all this in our user requirements and made sure we had capabilities to fulfill all of these in our tech stack.
Sorry guys, I was talking on mute. So the DMS, to get a little bit more information about exactly how it was built and what it was, It was an overarching system that encompassed multiple technologies to manage all of the operational data in the facility. It had the primary repository and the systems for gathering all of the process data from the shop floor and laboratories, both time series and non-time series data. A separate subsystem existed that was dedicated to focus entirely on equipment and environmental variables. That was our environmental monitoring system there. This gave us the best of both worlds. We had all of our data in one place, yet we had two separate interfaces that were dedicated to different sets of users. Now, although the DMS is the overarching system, it was actually the second phase of the development of our data gathering and historization. We initially started on a much smaller scale with just the equipment and environmental monitoring in one floor for one lab. And we relied entirely at that time on Ignition coupled with some Opto22 remote IO cards. The great advantage we had here with using it this way and with using Ignition specifically was our capability to come back and re-architect a larger system, which then enveloped the existing laboratory floor. And we were able to migrate all of the data points to the newer system with almost no data loss due to downtime. So in order to choose the architecture, we went through a comprehensive selection process. We focused on open architecture as much as possible, Industry 4.0. We wanted to build an architecture that not only took advantage of all these modern technologies, but was somewhat future-proofed so that we could use these for years to come into the future. So the several different technologies that we chose was obviously Ignition Perspective. For me, this was my second major deployment for Ignition in the cell and gene therapy industry. So it was actually an easy decision to turn to Ignition again, as it's the most flexible platform on which to develop the automation backbone. We chose Opto22 hardware which, as we discovered more about it, we saw as the perfect intersection of like an ideal integration with Ignition and still had more standard programmable control aspect with excellent physical IO. Canary Historian was used for the tens of thousands of points we historized, and we chose MQTT and SparkPlug-B as our overall communications protocol between all edge components in our core systems.
So the resulting functionality we got from this tech stack gave us a group of open source technologies which enabled us to build whatever user interfaces and answer what were required and answer any user ask that would come in. We had a system which was developed on top of the line cutting edge technology, and because of the way that all of these different technologies are designed and the modularity of them, it's infinitely expandable. As a cell and gene therapy CDMO, we are limited to geographical areas for treating our patients. So we would eventually have to expand to a global organization. Because of the tech stack we use and because of the way Ignition and Opto and Canary and MQTT operate, we didn't really have to think about that from a geographical perspective. From our perspective as automation administrators, it's one system, one global system, making it easy to deploy and infinitely expandable, which was a huge win for us. One of the other major things that we were able to do is develop a client portal. To my knowledge, no other CDMO has a client portal with the capabilities that we had, enabling clients to be able to see reports, get access to their data, and enabling us to quickly and effectively and efficiently work with end users and get them any of the deliverables we have. So some of the displays we developed, to go through this a little bit, one of the major asks we had right out of the gate was enabling our end users to go paperless. There's always that desire to be paperless. So to that end, we developed a set of interface displays which would enable us, as asks came in, to take templates or forms, things that were manually being filled out on paper, and take those and develop them within Ignition. Now, related to our validation strategy, everything within Ignition is modular, enabling us to define everything very well and qualify everything individually and then as part of a whole. So what we did here is it enabled us to take things like cleaning logs and equipment log books and develop an interface which enables the end users to fill those out and be stored in a database, all virtually utilizing Ignition. When we have a new ask come in, all we do is develop a new template to fill out and add a new tab. One of the other big asks we had was from the engineering department. Engineering was responsible for monitoring all the equipment that was out on the shop floor, ensuring everything was operating the way it should for processes and making changes based on whatever those processes would be. What we're looking at here is a look at our environmental monitoring system at a display that was specifically designed so that engineering could adjust set points for alarms and adjust criticality and enable and disable those alarms as they were doing work, as systems went out of use and then came back into use with the new client. This is how you would, this is the pop-up which would enable engineering to change set points. We had an e-sign associated with it, and there was an audit trail behind everything, making sure that we stayed in 21 CFR Part 11 compliance.
Great. So the benefits that we received from doing it this way were, multiple. Ignition wasn't just a win from a technical perspective. It wasn't just a way for us to be able to deploy rapidly and do things in an open manner that made it easier for our engineers and our automation engineers to be able to do it. It was actually a much greater win from the business perspective because it really allowed for the democratization of process data, right? It gives a streamlined approach to be able to manage the data. It gave us the ability to expand the system architecture as the company grew and as new areas and locations were added on. It allowed for faster and more effective data analysis because it made all of that data available in one place and instantly available to the business, which obviously, at the end results in quicker decision making and allows a CDMO to be more agile and move much more quickly, which is really the primary purpose of going with a contract organization like that from a client's perspective.
Thank you, Eric and Andre. That was great. I do have a couple questions about your project. You just mentioned kind of scaling this solution up in the future. Can you tell us a little more about how you built the project to make that possible?
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking, Brad. It's primarily through the modular approach that we took, not only with the hardware layer, but also with the UNS architecture and the deployment of our assets throughout the shop floor and throughout the buildings. We modeled everything as close as possible to the shop floor. That allowed us to develop and deploy each building, each floor, each business area separately, and that in the future will allow us to take the very same approach when deploying new process control panels to the new business areas, as well as additional projects within Ignition, to new buildings and new sites. And additionally, the rapid deployment capability that Ignition afforded us was key in the success of that strategy.
Great, thanks. You also mentioned using SQL as well as the new MongoDB connector. How were those both being used in the application?
So within the pharma industry, only roughly 40% of our data is time series based data, which we have an historian for. Relational data makes up the other 60%. That's sample data, results, run files, whatever it might be that's coming from various pieces of equipment being used on the shop floor. That data doesn't always come in the nicest fashion, and sometimes we have to do a little bit of work to get it into our database in a way that we can then disseminate that back to the end users. The connector for MongoDB and how easy it is to build SQL queries within Ignition made all of that so much easier, more effective, and more efficient when we operated that. So being able to take a display, have your batch trends for all your critical process parameters, and then be able to display the relational data that's associated with that batch right on the same display was a major win for us, especially for the operators and the people, again, that are making the decisions to develop the product as it's being made.